Thank you, President, and I'm pleased to rise to speak to the Food Amendment Bill 2020. And as previous speakers have said, this does aim to support a more consistent and transparent regulatory process for the regulation of our food businesses and our cafes and all of those businesses that we're so pleased to be back visiting and eating in. Now, it does this by providing an online portal for councils, and I'd have to say this intention to provide this portal will help improve councils' reporting processes, compliance, monitoring and operational decision making. And this is very important. And I think this was, I will also make mention of the Legal and Social Issues Committee inquiry into iCook Foods. And what we found was that there was big problems in these areas. We really found that, in particular to Dandenong City Council, that a lot of those areas were lacking, that information was lacking, that those processes were lacking, and this bill actually goes to some way to improving and addressing a lot of the issues that the committee found in what was a whirlwind inquiry. In less than a month, we produced a 200-page report that really did highlight a lot of the shortcomings in the Food Act, but also in the ways that councils reported and regulated food businesses. So this bill does go to a number of those areas that the committee found. We certainly made recommendations that the Food Act be amended, and I think the Food Act, this goes towards some of those areas that we found were lacking in the Food Act, and I'm really pleased to be supporting this bill because I think it does modernise the Food Act in many ways. I think there's still more ways that we could go in modernising the Food Act, in streamlining it to make it easier for small businesses, but also for councils to regulate those small businesses. And that was certainly what we found with iCook Foods, that while I probably won't say too much about it because it still is, there still is court proceedings being undertaken, but we found that the communication processes just were not adequate, that the communication processes were outdated, that they were severely lacking, and this led to some of the problems that led to the closure of iCook Foods. And in fact, had those problems been fixed, who knows, it may actually have meant that business didn't close down. We saw that that the City of Greater Dandenong just couldn't manage the processes. And I certainly think that a number of the amendments made in here do go a long way to addressing that. And I guess it's just another note to say that why parliamentary committees are important, and why I really, particularly as an independent member, gain so much from the inquiry process and from the parliamentary committee process, that you get to have a very significant deep dive into legislation and into the issues that you might not have the opportunity to do. And I certainly found this with iCook Foods. I learned a lot about the Food Act that I probably never thought I'd need to know. I learned a lot about unseasonal slugs, and the mating of and the sleeping patterns of slugs, things I never thought that I would learn about in my life. But I am much wiser on the goings-on of slugs in February in Melbourne. But this bill does make some really good and I think really sensible amendments. also just, when a business changes hands, that the business needs to be re-registered, that it's not that the business under completely new management stays registered. It actually now requires a re-registration process. I think these are all very sensible amendments that lead to greater transparency. I'd have to say that I think, when you look at the recommendations that the inquiry into iCook Foods made, we found that that the Food Act really was lacking, and that needed amendments to enable the management of conflicts of interest, where a local council is a shareholder in that business and is authorised to regulate and determine. So it was this conflict of interest where you have a local council runs a food business and regulates food businesses in their area, and this did highlight some conflicts there. Now, this bill doesn't go towards remedying that, but I think that certainly that certainly is something that we would recommend that the government does consider going forward in what I imagine will be a series of amendments to the Food Act 1984. It does go towards consolidating reporting requirements. It goes to a way of providing online transmission for publication of orders, for publication of reporting, and I think these are all very much needed and will be welcomed modernisations of our processes for regulating our food businesses in Victoria. It's part of the way, and I think the online portal will be something that will be appreciated by businesses and by councils alike. I will listen with interest to some of the questions that Ms Crozier will raise during the committee process, but on that note, I commend the bill.